Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel Talking Spices. Today we are going to be making eggplant stew, and this is a meal that I make almost weekly. It's one of our family favorites and I finally made a video for it, so let's get into the recipe. So here are the ingredients. I've got some ground beef, that's about 250 grams, and you can even use less than that. I have a cup of tomato sauce, a red pepper, a tomato, 4 cloves of garlic, onion, eggplant, and here for the spices I've got a large tablespoon of sumac, a teaspoon of cardamom, half a teaspoon of cumin, a teaspoon of allspice, half a teaspoon of pepper, and half a teaspoon of salt. I've also got this pomegranate syrup that we're going to use. And so now for the eggplant, what you're going to want to do is peel the skin. And this eggplant was being a little stubborn with me, but I managed to peel it in the end. So now we're going to chop our eggplant. So just cut off the end, and then each piece will be about 1 centimeter in thickness here. And you can see that the eggplant is nice and white in the inside. So this means it's fresh, it's really just ripe enough to cook. If it's brown in the inside, you're not going to want to use it because it could be rotten. So here I'm just cutting it into cubes, or cutting it into 4 rather. And this might seem like really large pieces, but don't worry because these reduce quite a bit in size when you cook them. So next we're just going to spread the eggplant out on this paper towel, and this is a really important step because this removes a bit of the excess moisture that comes from the eggplant onto the paper towel, because when we saute the eggplant we're going to want to give it a bit of a sear, and if this has a lot of water in it then it's going to make that really difficult. So you just want to kind of give that a pat, and you can already see that the water's coming out on the paper towel there. So just let that sit for a little while we chop our veggies. So here's the veggies all chopped. We've got onions, tomatoes, red pepper, and then we've got the cloves of garlic that are ready to be crushed. So that way everything's ready to go and we can start cooking. So I've just heated up some olive oil here, and I'm adding in the diced onions. So we're going to saute the onions until they're translucent. And this recipe, if you have it, it's important to have a really hot pan. So that's what helps just to cook the eggplant the way that you want it. So now that the onions are ready, I'm just adding in the eggplant. So that's been sitting for probably about 20 minutes, and you can see that the paper towel is pretty soaked with water. So that's the goal, to try to get as much water out of that eggplant as possible. So now this step might take a little while because you want to cook the eggplant enough that it's reduced in size and at the same time giving it a bit of a color on each side. So I'm adding a bit more spray here. So I had initially sprayed the pan as well, and now I'm just adding a bit more just to prevent any sticking and allow for that eggplant to sear a little more. So try to let it sit on the heat and not stir it too much. I know it might be tempting to stir it a lot, but you want to try to get some color on that eggplant. So as you can see, it's reduced so much in size. This is why I don't cut it very small, because I know that the chunks are going to be smaller. So here we're adding in the ground beef. So this is about 250 to 300 grams of ground beef. So you could definitely use less ground beef than that. It's really up to you and your preference. I feel like every time I make this, I do it slightly differently. Sometimes I only put a little bit of ground beef. Sometimes I put this amount. So it's really up to what you like. But I try to not let the ground beef take over the taste of the eggplants, is the eggplant's the real star of this dish. That's what you want to highlight. So everything else is just a nice complement to go with that eggplant, I find. So now I'm adding in the red pepper. And what you could also do is cook the red pepper separately and just saute it until it's nice and soft. I was a little bit crunched for time, so I didn't do that, but that's what you could do. Otherwise, it'll take a little bit longer to cook in the same pot. But in the end, it cooks all the way through because we're going to let it simmer. That's just an option you have if you want to do that. So I'm adding in the spices now. And the main spice that you've got to have in this dish is that sumac. It is so good. Sumac just goes so well with eggplant. I just love the way the flavors combine with each other. So now I'm adding in a little bit of olive oil, and that's just to prevent it from sticking because I do have it on medium to high heat, so it is starting to stick a little bit here. So now I'm adding in some garlic. So that was 4 cloves of garlic that I crushed. And if you've watched any of my other videos, you know that I like to add garlic a little bit later in the recipe because it only takes 1 minute to cook, and that way you can maintain that garlicky flavor and not lose any of it, which tends to happen if you put the garlic in too early, I find. So now that I've been cooking that garlic just in the middle there, now I'm going to stir it up. And you can smell all those flavors now, the sumac and the cardamom and the allspice and the garlic. Everything's just really starting to come together. So I'm adding in the tomato now. And the tomato gives it some moisture. It helps it from sticking to the pan. And so next we're going to just cover that, lower the heat, just let it simmer for a few minutes. And so now I'm adding in the tomato sauce. So this is also something you can adjust to your preference. That's half a cup of water as well. So like I said, I always make this slightly differently, but it always turns out to be good. Sometimes I add more tomato sauce, sometimes I use this amount. So it's really up to your preference. So this time I used a cup of tomato sauce. Okay, so that's been simmering for about 10 minutes, and you just want to keep stirring it here. And as you can see, well, you can't really see that well, but I usually let it simmer until the oils start to come up to the top. That's my indication that the spices are blending really well and that this is on its way to be ready soon. So I give it another stir there. And next I'm going to add in the grenadine, the pomegranate syrup. So this is really delicious with eggplant. I love the flavor. It's like a tangy, sweet, citrusy flavor all in one. And you know, it goes so well with eggplant. I just can't emphasize that enough. It is just the best combination. So I'm mixing that around, and I used a drizzle, so I can't really tell you a measurement because I'm not exactly sure how much that is, but you really have to just use your judgment and put in how much you think would be good. So now moving on to the rice, I'm just heating up some vegetable oil there. And now I'm adding in some vermicelli, so I'm just breaking it apart with my hands. And you can buy the kind that's already broken apart into little pieces, but this kind comes a regular length and you just have to break it apart. So that's about the amount you would need. It's about a handful. And so on medium heat, you just want to watch this very closely because it can burn in the blink of an eye if you're not paying attention. So you just want to take a spoon and stir it little by little. And as you can see, it's starting to become the color, like a brownish golden color, pretty quickly. So as you can see, the color is turning golden brown pretty quickly, so you want to just keep your eye on it. Don't take your eye away from it. It can burn very quickly, so you just want to keep watching it until it's ready. And in the meantime, you're going to want to have your rice ready to go as well, and your water boiling. So turn on your kettle, have your rice ready to put into the pot. So now this is getting to the color that you want, a brown, but you know, in between toasted and burnt. You just want it to be toasted. And so you can see that that color, it's like happening by the second. You can see it getting darker and darker. So I'm just giving it a few more seconds there. And now I'm adding in the rice that I had rinsed and soaked. So give that a stir. Make sure that the vermicelli is mixed in pretty well with the rice. And so next you're going to want to add your boiling water. So I just moved my pots around here because this stove can be a little tricky. Some of the elements are hotter than others. So anyway, we're adding in the water here. So that's 4 cups of water to 2 cups of rice. So pretty straightforward. You want to just bring this rice to a boil. And then once it's boiling, you want to just lower the heat and let it simmer. So in the meantime, your beef eggplant stew is simmering, and that should continue to simmer on low to medium heat. So this is just to show you now that we're lowering the heat on the rice because it's boiling, and just let it sit there. So once you start to see the holes in the rice and the water is pretty evaporated, you turn off the heat and then just place a towel over top and just let that sit undisturbed for about 10 minutes. Okay, and you can remove it from the heat. So now everything's ready. We're about to serve. So mind you that the eggplant stew had been simmering for another 20 minutes or so. You want to let that simmer as long as you possibly can, and the longer it simmers, the better it will taste. So this rice is ready. It's so fluffy and light. That's how you want it to be. And we're going to move on to serving. So you want to serve some of that beautiful rice. I love this kind of rice. It's so simple and so good, and it keeps well in the fridge too. So now we're going to add in that eggplant stew, and this is a great recipe to have for dinner on a weekend. It takes a little longer than my quick recipes, so do it on a Saturday or Sunday, and there we go. You can have it for lunch the next day. It keeps well, and it makes a pretty large portion, so you can definitely have this for dinner even 2 nights in a row if you don't get tired of it. So here it is. It's so healthy. It's really good. It's full of nutrients, full of flavor, and it's something that you will just make over and over again because it's really great. And so thanks so much for watching, and I hope you liked this video. So if you did enjoy this video, I would definitely appreciate a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more recipes like this. I try to post weekly, so stay tuned and enjoy.